Welcome to the new episode of Fullfunnel Live. We are finally back in 2024. And before this podcast episode, I just want to make a very, very short intro. We are discussing with Vlad one of the great podcast episodes we have listened to, and it was all about practical workshops that deliver the aha moments. And we thought this is the best way how we can deliver most of value this year. So we want to jump into the agenda immediately. You know that in the last quarter, first of all, 2023 was very complicated. We had a lot of layoff stuff, economy situation, and in the last quarter, a lot of teams reached us out, and we had these conversations, literally that could be summarized as we need to get revenue now. All these long-term initiatives make perfect sense, right? ABM, demand generation, brand, all this makes perfect sense, but we need revenue now. And we need to generate pipeline as well now. But we have limited resources. So this is what we want to cover today. We want to share the complete process that you guys can leverage, as always, with practical examples. And also what motivated us to talk about this today is the question that we got from Dan Weiler from our community. He asked us, is there a process that kind of can help you to qualify, prioritize, determining intent, mapping all accounts, and basically doing it with a large list of accounts, right? Which could be very time consuming. How can we accelerate it? I think this is the biggest problem. Why? Because a lot of teams, to answer the question, we need to get revenue now, what they usually do, right? They play two games. The first one is standard MQL games, right? Let's create PDF and gate it and then send to sales. So let's do product pitch and webinar and then again send all the signups to sales. Or the second one is building a big list, doing air cover, right? Ads and mass outbound. That's it. So you basically play spray and pray approach.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because the idea is there are 3%, the infamous 3% of buyers, or 5% of buyers who are buying right now in the market. And so the idea is, oh, okay, so let's just reach out to everyone and hope that we get to the 5%. And of course, if these are the people that it's the first time that they are hearing about you and they are already really in the buying mode and they have been evaluating and other vendors, maybe your chance of closing them is not that high. So I think the question is, how do we get to the buyers that are more, to the accounts, to the companies and buyers that are most likely to buy from us soon, right? To kind of qualify that. So we want to revenue right now, but the realistic question is, how can we prioritize, identify those companies that are in the market, they are further down the buyer journey, and we as a company, as a vendor, are likely to close?
Yeah, so the answer to the question, we need to get revenue now, how can we do it, is on the papers is simple, right? You need to define the accounts that are likely to have a conversation with your sales team, are likely to buy your product. The hard part is how actually to define these accounts and how to create a relevant, nurturing content that would generate demand for your product and actually generate opportunity, right? So this is what we are going to cover today. And the first part in that process is understanding that whenever you select these accounts, you need to consider two things. The first one is understanding that not all accounts that fit your ICP, and I'm not even going to talk about the ICP pillars, right? But let's say all accounts that were selected by your sales team that fit your firmographics are actually going to buy. So first of the things that you need to do is to separate all accounts that you are going to target into two lists, active focus and future pipeline. The difference between two lists is that active focus are the accounts that have already some level of relationship with your company, some engagement, they are aware of your company, of your product, and somehow they demonstrated or you were able to identify that these accounts are at least at the consideration stage of their buying journey, maybe vendor shortlisting, maybe reviewing the different solutions. So we are going to share with you a few examples in a moment, right? And future pipeline, these are the cold accounts. You have no relationship with these accounts. You need to create, first of all, you need to attract their attention. And it's not realistic to expect revenue or pipeline generation from these accounts. I think this is the biggest mistake all marketing and sales team make. They make a big list, right? And then they don't realize that with some accounts, that's why sales cycles are long, right? With some accounts, it will take maybe 300 days just to have the first conversation. I'm maybe a little bit exaggerating, but the point is, right? So it will take a lot of time to get even that conversation started, right? For multiple reasons. So that's why you need to have this focus, and you need to understand the criteria, right? How can you build this active list, right? And what would be the criteria for the future pipeline list? So the first step in that process is basically understanding the sources you need to look at when building this active focus list and future pipeline list, right? So we usually with Flat recommend to look at 5 pillars, which we are going to present in a second, right? Relationships, intent and engagement data, marketing automation, recent events, and sales selected list. Why I'm saying sales selected list? Because unfortunately you can't ignore sales, right? And sometimes,
unfortunately, okay.
But I mean, I'm kidding, of course, guys. The point I'm making here is that sometimes sales are just sending, a wish list of accounts, or we want to have all these nice logos, right? We want to prospect all these big banks or whoever, right? But sometimes they are making relevant lists just because of some level of relationship or whatever, because of some research, right? So let's review them one by one. I think it makes sense to start with the relationship first, right?
Absolutely. So when we talk about the relationship, what we are talking about, you can do this, I think best. Yeah, and then this one. Sorry, just helping here get this on the screen because it could be helpful for you to see concrete examples and also actual query that you can use in Sales Navigator to figure this out. So what we see here, one example is a former customer of ours, James, who joined a new company that fits an ICP. So this is an example of what we mean by a relationship, right? Or to translate that into a LinkedIn Sales Navigator query, it would be accounts where, well, no, in this case, like we are looking for the buyer, so we have some firmographics to select the right accounts, but actually we're looking for buyers that have worked in a company that used to be either a previous customer or a current customer of ours. So, right, that's an example. Or where we have some other form of relationship with those accounts. Now, I think the first question that I like to ask you, Andre, is like, why do we look at this relationship? Why is it important? I think a lot of people can kind of intuit this, but I'd like to hear your precise reason why you want to look at the relationship as the top criterion, actually.
Because the truth is that to generate opportunity with that account, we need to have answers to that question: how can, what message, what offer should we share with this account that would demonstrate value of our product and show how our product solves their needs and challenges, right, in a meaningful way that basically presents the business value of our product. Now, the question is, how can we get this information? And if we have good connections inside target accounts, that's the lowest hanging fruit, right? You basically minimize time to getting the answer to that question. If you have a person who could be champion, insider, connector, right? A person who can share with you this insider information about who are the right people to talk to. Because let's say you guys, imagine you are selling to enterprise organizations, 10K employees, 15K employees, even like 1K employees. You might have multiple buyers. Let's say a lot of companies, they have these buying committee roles, VP of something, right? But then you open Sales Navigator and you see 25 people. Who are you going to market to, right? With the help of that person, you can get information. You need to talk to John Doe, you need to talk to somebody else, right? Next, you can get a lot of insights about what are the needs of that account, what is happening, what are the challenges, what are the key initiatives, etc. Right? What would be the best approach to reach out to these people? Can we ask to make an intro? Right? This is the lowest hanging fruit, because when you collect these insights, you'll be easily able to allocate that account either to future pipeline, so you know you need to build relationship, and you understand their challenges, right? And usually all accounts will fit one of the typical challenge clusters, right? They have challenge A, challenge B, challenge C, or challenge D, right? And then you can nurture them with the relevant content. So that's the first thing. The second one, with the help of that person, you can create a meaningful offer, right? You can start meaningful engagements, and we'll talk about the next steps later. So that's the first thing that we always prioritize.
I just wanted to add another piece of information. So what we should realize, of course, is that we are now trying to understand those accounts, where they are in the buyer journey. We are trying to understand if we should focus on them. And we do understand that we are making some assumptions that we are not sure about it. We cannot be sure about it. And knowing that person can really help you quickly, even like qualify or disqualify an account.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share a quick example of a client that I'm working with right now, where we had some accounts prioritized. Initially 50 accounts, came down to 10, then we came down to 4. And then we were talking to somebody from the organization, from our client's organization, and they said, oh, by the way, I know that they are totally not going to buy from us because I know that they still have a 2-year contract with our competitor and they cannot break that contract. Okay, so.
And this is basically you save your time and budget. Instead of prospecting or sending a bunch of cold emails and then getting a reply, we are not interested, right? And instead of making a dumb decision, oh, maybe we need to change our copy or whatever, you just stop focusing on that account, right? So that's the key. And you'll be able to also to understand if this account is completely cold, right, and maybe they are not aware of the challenges that your product solves, that account should belong to the future pipeline. With the help of your champion, your first KPI shouldn't be pipeline generation, but connecting and engaging with the buying committee members, making them aware of your product, right? So that's the first thing. Let me know in the chat if that makes sense. Type plus or minus.
Or drop a question if you have it. And meanwhile, we are going to start talking about the second point that we are looking, or the source of data to look when we are building the account lists. And it is the intent data. And when we talk about intent data, we really primarily are interested in the so-called first-party intent data, or in other words, your own. So what is the level of engagement and intent that these target accounts have with your brand and with your demand gen programs? And what you see here is just a screenshot of a very simple view of target accounts and how they are engaging, in this case, with our website. So we know that some of those companies, so for example, the first company here on the list, have spent 1 hour, they have had 3 visits. If we drill down, we can maybe start understanding if what kind of pages they have looked at. So we might not be interested in companies that bounce off a blog post, or maybe visit some content that is not that relevant to what we are selling. But if we have, for example, another company that has spent, let's say, a similar amount of time, 1-2 hours, you can see, for example, the company number 4 here has spent 4 hours on the website, had 16 visits. when you drill down, you may see that there have been like at least 3 different people checking out maybe high intent pages, such as your pricing product.
This is a segment from high intent pages.
This is okay. So we actually already know that there has been a filter applied. So we know that I have visited a high intent page. Like, so what I'm now sharing is I'm sharing this piece of information that you're using to understand the level of engagement and intent. So level of engagement expressed in the time visited, the amount of visits, the number of people that are visited, number of repeat visits. I think this is really important. And then the level of intent here expressed as the type of pages that they have visited. And again, of course, if they had multiple visits to these high intent pages, spend more time, again, it's a higher indication that they might have an intent to buy from you.
And what I would love to summarize this and then to answer a question from Akshay is that when we look at the intent data, first of all, we can recognize accounts that should belong to future pipeline just because they fit ICP and they did some level of engagement. Maybe they checked, your articles, whatever, your blog, etc., right? And you understand it's just curiosity. It's not the buying intent, right? So somehow you attracted their attention. So for you, it's good to pick up these accounts, right, and put it into future pipeline list, and then you can initiate the conversations. You can do the relevant targeting with the relevant content through multiple formats, right? So we won't touch this for now. And then you can identify, you can define the patterns of engaged accounts that should belong to active pipeline. Repetitive visits, spend a lot of time on high intent pages. For me, that's a super relevant example, right? If company comes to you, especially if you operate in a narrow market, right? So a company comes multiple times in the recent 30 to 60 days to your website, check your price and check your demo, check your vertical, job role case studies, comparison reports, vertical solutions. That's definitely, it's not the buying intent. I want to make it clear. Buying intent, when they click a button, book a demo with you. It's not that difficult. Even if you have a super complicated form, if they have buying intent, they would deal with this. But this is engagement, right? And it means that they're at least at the consideration stage. So potentially they're considering your product. So for you, that account should belong to the active focus list. And to answer your question, what tools help with this? We also recommend our sponsor of this episode, company called DealFront. I dropped a link in the chat so you can see a pinned comment. DealFront is a leading European intent data provider. And what is cool about this platform comparing to all other platforms is that they have, first of all, if you are selling to Europe, you know that you guys will all deal with GDPR. So they handle they basically ensure GDPR compliance. They have market signals, they have website visitors, and as well they have European databases, so you can immediately build the buying committee and get the right contacts based on your titles, right? Because here you can see only the accounts. You don't know who actually visited your profile. But if you know the standard buying committee structure, then DealFront simplifies for you building the list of target buyers, and you can find them immediately on LinkedIn or get their contacts, right? So that's basically the second source that we are looking at. The third one is marketing automation. Let's cover it quickly.
So when we speak about marketing automation, there is an assumption that you're doing some primarily, of course, we're talking about here about email marketing, so that you actually have some demand generation using whatever marketing automation software that you're using, whether that's HubSpot, Marketo, maybe even Pardot, if you have to use that. But here, the whole idea is if you have real educational content, and you see that there is higher engagement from target accounts, what you can actually do with a lot of marketing automation software is you can make a filter like the one that you can see on the screen for the people who are watching this live, is a filter where basically we say companies that visit high intent page. In our example, that's a consulting page, right? And we are interested to know, to start basically, if we have information about their firmographics, of course, you will include that in the filter. But if you don't have that, then you can, then you first have to start, of course, with the level of intent. Now, depending on the size of your listing, how engaged your list is, you may layer in other filters, such as, for example, again, some proxy to engagement is whether that's clicks or opens when it comes, and visits, repeat visits, etc., to start prioritizing those lists. And then this can be a really cool source with one really cool advantage. Well, I would say two. First of all, this is not only information about target accounts, but it's actually information about concrete people, which is, by the way, another thing that you can take into account. So, of course, if you have an interest by a junior person, you might rate that less than if you have, let's say, an interest from kind of like the ideal buyer or ideal buyer role in the buying committee. But the point here that I wanted to share is you have the person. So you not only know who you should connect to, but you can actually, and that's the second advantage, you can actually see what kind of engagements they had, what was the content that they were maybe consuming, interested in, pages that they visited, etc. So you have all that information that you can now use to start a relevant conversation with that person, and start basically working on the account.
And you can make dynamic lists, so you can set up automation. You can define these high intent web pages, visits, right, or clicks, and then you make a dynamic list of this account. So basically, it's complementary to the intent data. Next, what we are going to look at, let's very quickly cover this, the recent events, right? Webinars, field events, depending on what you guys are doing. So this is the example of like the reports that we are seeing in our software.
Goldcast that we are actually using right now, that you're logged into. So what I just wanted to highlight here, sorry, Andre, just wanted to highlight here, okay, again, depending on the size of your event or the audience that you had on your event, you may have or not have to apply specific filters. So in this case, there were like 1,300 people who signed up, and like more than, what was it, like 500 or so who showed up to that event. Now, the things that I would be looking at as kind of the signals is, obviously, it is higher engagement if somebody has attended an event versus if somebody has registered and then decided not to attend the event. Then you can like make a difference, like if you have that information in your software, like how long have they stayed in the event. And then, like, depending on the type of software that you have all sorts of information in terms of like, did they participate in the chat, ask questions, maybe click on some links that you have shared. And then, very interesting as well, if you have run specific polls. So imagine that today we wanted to qualify people who might be looking for consulting, ABM consulting. And imagine, we are not doing that, but imagine we ran a poll that says, okay, what is your stage of implementing ABM? And there were options like, oh, we are just thinking about implementing it, we are not interested, and there may be one, okay, we are implementing it and we are looking for help. Just giving a simple example. Well, now people who have voted or rated, how do you say that, responded there with, okay, we are looking for help, could be potentially more relevant. And just one more thing to share here, sorry, is what is really, really cool is if you're making events, webinars, for example, and you're making them engaging and you're encouraging the audience to ask questions, this is absolute, this is the most valuable thing that you can have, because look, now I can't see this on the screen here, but I will actually read. For ABM, what are the warm-up methods beside target digital ads are most effective? Now, this was a question, and I believe, I'm not sure, there were so many questions, we might have not even gotten to it, but whether let's say I didn't get to all the questions, now I can go and reach out to that person and can say, hey, I'm so sorry we didn't get to your question. I'd be happy to jump on a call and answer that question, which is something that I did once and ended up with a sales qualified opportunity. Or I could just, go back if we have touched on that question, just wanted to make sure that you saw that. Was this a sufficient answer? I have some other researches I could share, or I could dive deeper in that question. You can start again a very relevant conversation with that person. Andre, you wanted to add something
I just
here?
wanted to say that we spent a lot of time explaining these principles to you and give you some more details, because a lot of companies never do this analysis. It just I don't know about you guys, but whenever we have conversations, lists are usually built by sales, and it's usually by applying firmographics, or they build because of their area, and that's it. So companies never pay attention to it. And basically that leads us to the last source, right? The sales selected list.
Yes.
So imagine this is what happens, right? So let's say Vlad sits here and he says, you know what? It would be nice to have on Fullfunnel website companies like McAfee and Norton, because let's say we want to sell to cybersecurity segment, right? So why did you select these accounts? Well, because they fit our ICP. They're big enough. Opportunity is huge, right? Revenue potential is huge. This is how many companies are usually building this list. And now question to you guys. You can see it on your screen. Without any scoring additional info, from these 5 sources, what accounts should be prioritized and what we pay less attention to? So let's say you have just, let's say, tell us intent data, marketing automation, relationship, sales selected list. From which source, without knowing any other information, it's just very basic question. Which accounts we should prioritize, and what accounts, let's say, we pay less attention to? Share with us in the chat. And I would, while you are typing, I would move to the second part of this podcast episode. Even if you'll do this analysis, right, and you define, maybe you will be able to define a lot of accounts that would belong future pipeline, that would belong also to active focus list. But you don't have resources, right? You don't have resources to prospect hundreds of accounts. This was basically the initial question from Daniel, right? What can we do if we have 300 accounts? Then the question, and then not the question, basically the core thing that you need to work on, what accounts we need to prioritize, what accounts we need to focus on according to our capacity. And that's why we developed this account scoring model, which we'll share with you. It's here. Let's share it, right? So when it comes, let's say you'll build this list of accounts. What we are doing is we are evaluating several things. So first of all, we try to evaluate revenue potential of the accounts, right? Is it basically, are we hunting antelope or are we hunting a field mice, right? So that's the first thing, just to understand.
Or elephants.
Yeah. So the second one is the relationship, because the answer is obvious, right? The accounts where we have relationship, we get faster feedback loop, we can faster qualify these accounts, we can faster understand the needs of that account, and we can faster tailor our offering and our messaging to these accounts. So when it comes to relationship, you see standard criteria that you can apply: good connections, right? Somebody from existing or past client joined your ICP, you met with these people at industry event and maybe agreed to follow up, right? You have common connections that can make an intro. Next one, what is important to evaluate is the product need evidence, right? What are the facts that can tell us that this account has a need, right? It could be, and again, we just shared here typical examples, right? Every business needs to answer that question. So it could be money raised, they could be hiring for specific positions, maybe they have a legacy stack, right? Maybe they made a change in the leadership, maybe they announced key initiative, right? Or whatever. So you need to define this. Basically the criteria that tell you guys that this account might have a need in your product. And next is the engagement and intent, right? Do we have any engagement with this account, right? Because sometimes you don't have any engagement and then you understand, right? So it's just completely cold account. You need to work on the relationship. And ultimately, when you do all of this scoring, finally, instead of being biased, let's focus on these biggest banks, etc., right? What you guys are doing, you have a clear list of accounts that are prioritized by these scores. And when it comes to scores, keep in mind that not all these parameters were created equal. You put more weights to what is more relevant to you. Let's say if they raised money in the recent 30 days is more relevant, you give it higher score, right? If the relationship is more relevant, you give it a higher score. Whatever, right? So to give you an idea, and this is an example. Obviously, this is a real example, but I changed the name of the companies, so you can see Apple and Microsoft here, right? But here is an idea. So you have different engagement sources: website high intent, free trial, engage with the content hub, boom, 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 new quality role in the last 6 to 12 months, X client. We have open ticket, right? Release cycle, boom, boom, boom. So, and then we have Microsoft, right? Which has twice lower engagement than the first one. So you don't need to be a magician to answer the question, what account we need to focus on, right? You look at this data and you have an answer to the question, what accounts you should focus on. If you do this priority, you have the revenue potential assigned to each of the accounts, right? And then if you have limited resources, let's say just one marketer and one sales representative, you understand, okay, maybe we can engage only 20 accounts with 5 buying committee members, 100 accounts in total, and potentially it will generate, let's say, 2 sales opportunities, and each of opportunity equals 200K, it will help us to basically hit our pipeline targets, right? That's exactly the way how you need to do it. The goal of this exercise to narrow down your focus on companies that are likely to have a conversation with you, that are likely to be converted, right? That's the second pillar. The first one is how we are selecting these accounts. The second one is how we prioritize on these accounts. And the last one, I think, is the most important thing that a lot of companies ignore, that I would share in a second. And
while Andre is trying to share this, I think it's a good moment to just quickly summarize this. We promised you to help answer the question, how can I get revenue now? And the way that we are going about it is to help you understand, out of all the potential customers, all the companies that are potential customer from you, how can you identify those accounts that are going to become your customer, that are most likely to become your customer in the near future? How can you differentiate between those that are more likely to become a customer, let's say in this quarter, or have an opportunity in this quarter, versus those that are kind of to nurture and build relationship with? The other list, then we looked like, okay, so concretely, what are the sources that you can look at, sources of data that you can look at to identify those accounts? And now we looked at also what are the criteria that you can use to now prioritize those accounts. All of these criteria are related to that basic question, how can we generate revenue now or soon? So hopefully that's like clear to you how these things work together. And then the biggest question that we already got in the chat here and that people have, okay, let's say now we understand how we should prioritize those accounts. We have a list of high priority accounts. So what should we do next with them? And that is the third topic of this episode, which is all about account planning.
Yeah, the last piece of the puzzle is to answer a question: what do we need to know about our account to create a nurturing content that will attract their attention and generate demand for our product? And what do we need to know about our account to create a messaging that will clearly present our product value and present it as a solution to their needs or challenges and generate sales opportunity. These are the questions that marketing and sales need to sit together and closely work on. What are these criteria? This should be your checklist, guys. In your relationship, it's basically, if you don't have answers to these questions, what else you're supposed to do? You create a generic pitch that you send to everybody. But the higher is your opportunity value, the more people would be ignoring the generic pitches and generic ads, right? So it should be personalized. Now, you need to create this checklist. You need to have this honest discussion between both teams, right? What do we need to know? And then basically the answer to your question, we need to generate revenue right now, is how are we going to get this information? There could be multiple examples. So let us share with you one practical example. Remember that first example that we shared, for example, let's talk about this one. I know that theory sounds good, but you all want to see practical examples, right? So
just share, and you can just switch between this and
yeah.
this here. Okay.
So we have James, right, who was head of sales at Alex client, and he joined a new company. New company is our ICP. If we'll go and find James on LinkedIn, right, here's the company, hashtag. And his new role, he is not anymore a sales leader, so he is not a decision maker, right? So he could be potentially, he could be our champion, potentially he could be just an insider providing us information about this target account. Now, if we want with Vladimir generating opportunity with this company, hashtag, right? We need to review what's happening at that company if we have any engagement. Basically, we review this company and we see that we have, I will just give you a background. We checked before this podcast episode, we checked marketing automation, we checked intent data. We don't have any engagement from that company, right? Now, if we'll go to that company, next step would be trying to understand what is their current structure. So let's say I will go to people and we'll type, let's say, marketing. And now we have, and I don't want even to do it in Sales Navigator. I just want to show you a very simple way that everybody would understand, right? So we see 86 people associated with that company, actually a lot, right? So marketing executive, head of marketing, etc. So I assume, it's just my assumption, based on the name, Victoria Cowell, she should be in UK, right? So if we open her profile, everything market data-driven, brand proud, results focused, boom, 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 marketing director with 15 plus years experience in global mid-size and SME businesses. Perfect, basically perfect person we need to engage with. And obviously, if we are doing account-based marketing, we need to, let's say, sell to marketing director, right? And she's marketing director for 8 years, so which means this, like, at least half of her career she spent at that company. This is a knowledgeable person, etc. So in that case, what can we do together, right? If we know we don't have any relationship with Victoria and we have no engagement with that account, which means that account should fit which of the lists, active focus or future pipeline?
Well, in this case, because we have a relationship, we can quickly determine. I would then, of course, first of all, I would reach out to James, have a conversation to start understanding whether they are, what is their stage, what are the challenges that are struggling with, are they actively looking for a solution like the solution that we can offer them. But based on the data that we have right now that you have described, they should go into the second bucket, right? So the second bucket being for future, so we need to focus on building a relationship, engaging this account, educating them. In other words, generating and hoping they will become future pipeline. I think this is a key concept to take here, right? So if that's the first thing to understand, if this is what we need to do, then we need to figure out, okay, how can we do that? So
yeah, and for me, the lowest hanging fruit would be, okay, we have James, right? We had successful project together. Why not inviting James to our live, like this Fullfunnel live, for example, right? And he can share his experience of doing account-based marketing and sales, right? So you can listen it from a real practitioner, right? And a good project, how it was executed. But or we can do an internal call where can we just invite James, right? And say, hey, would you like, so we would like to interview, get your feedback, structure this, and we want also to add snippets to the case study. And by the way, what would you think if we'll invite Victoria and we'll invite her in a way that we'll say, hey, we saw that James joined your company, right? We had a fantastic project. So you are very lucky to have this talent that's now business development manager. By the way, we are going to have a call with him, discussing and reflecting on the projects that we have done, also brainstorming what could be done better or what could be done differently now, right? And if you want, would be great to catch up. You can join and you can also listen to the ideas, right? And to the things that we have done together. So potentially you can just think about what could be implemented at Nash Tech, right?
Yeah, and I think you could even make it more enticing, because we know that a lot of companies have a challenge of sales and marketing collaboration, right? The two teams working together. And we know that in companies like Nash Tech, let's say that we had, based on our understanding of that company, we can determine this to be the case. For example, that they are sales led, and that sales kind of has a disproportionate amount of people and budget and power in the organization. And that's actually a quick check on, for example, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, just taking that as example, not saying that this is the case for Nash Tech company here. And then we can say, hey, you know what, actually one of the topics that we really want to dive into is, and something that we are very proud of how we did that with James in his previous companies, is how we set up that collaboration, how valuable that was, that was, and what you can learn about it, and maybe get some ideas on how to apply the similar approaches in your company, right? So I think somebody asked, isn't it better to focus on, let's say, a niche or on a specific challenge? Yes, the more you start understanding about this account, the more you can personalize the messaging, content. Of course, the more effective your actions will be.
Yeah, and before we'll cover all the questions that you guys have, one more example, because that was relationship based, right? Mm-hmm. So we just wanted, because this is the lowest hanging fruit. You just reach out to him, you ask about what. So for example, we could ask James, even simple questions, like you join sales, how well ICP is defined? How would you evaluate your collaboration with marketing? Bad, why? How would you evaluate the inbound pipeline, the quality of inbound, the brand awareness? So you can get immediately a lot of insights, and then you can just plan the right content. If you are doing the thought leadership ads, you can, but let's say, guys, that we are posting on LinkedIn, right? So we can easily put that account to a relevant group and start just targeting them with the very relevant content. And when I also, for example, if that topic was relevant to them, I would just definitely reach out and invite that person to this podcast episode. But this is what I wanted to share next, just to show a different example, which come from here. So let's say, let's put it on the full screen. Cool. So let's say we selected this company, Illumi, right, in Copenhagen. So next step, reviewing if we have any connections, right? And then we see, let's say we have one connection, Matthias, that works for that company, right? So next step is it our close connection, or just how, for you, it's also essential to evaluate that level of relationship. Is it so you can apply it to scoring, right? Is it close connection or just random connection? So that's the first thing. The second one is running account research, right? So in ideal world, why we prioritize relationship? Because you can get real-time feedback. Otherwise, you need to do the research. You need to review all possible information that will help you to get answer to the question, how will be relevant to that account? How can we create the relevant content? How can we create the relevant offer? As simple as that, right? So it could be press releases, CEO interviews, websites, account insights, whatever, right? So anything that you can any source where you can get this information from, right? So let's say in this example, we saw that this company is clearly going up market because they gated pricing, right? And they request to book a demo, which means usually that it's not a cheap solution, right? As simple as that. So the next step is that we are basically reviewing everything and we are making hypotheses. So what might be the need of that account, right? What might be the challenges and how can we help? So we say, okay, they raised 55 million and they invest in growth. What is the proof of this? They opened 2 offices in UK, in the United States, and they hired VP of sales, right? It just basically means that they put that money to make more money. Then we look at their job postings, and then we see that they're actively hiring SDRs and account executives, right? Which means that they have money which they want to put in sales, and I think it's just all about going up market to generate more this enterprise logos with more proactive outreach, right? They sell enterprise solution because there is no pricing on website. Demo requests are routed to sales. We checked it, right? And our assumption, their current buyer journey is reevaluating their go-to-market strategy, which is aligning it with enterprise sales and account-based marketing. Why? Because we saw in our intent data, right? So they were prioritized by scores. They visited our go-to-market strategy guide. They checked our ABM strategy guide. They sign up to a few of our events, right? And also marketing strategy mentioned in the responsibilities of our champion, right? And we have a few people that basically a few thought leaders with whom they are connected to. So we can just simply ask, are you guys working with these people or no, right? And then basically mapping the next steps, right? That could be a question. Okay, what's next? So here, simple idea. And I just don't want to overcomplicate it because in ideal world, you need to sit down and plan really exact steps, right? But just simple idea, manual engagement with Matthias, VP of sales in UK and USA and CEO, right? So first the idea, we have a champion, I would reach out and just validate, hey guys, saw a lot of engagement so that you came, for example, for this event. How was it? Did you get some answers to the questions? Am I right assuming that you guys are going enterprise, right? And you are developing ABM motion, how it's going, right? Why I'm asking, because I saw that you are hiring actively VP of sales, right? You are open the offices. So what's am I correct with my assumption, right? So we can have this conversation. We can map out, basically we can create the relevant content. And here I presented nurturing content, right? So I could present something I can share to Matthias, right? And basically share this piece of content marketing and sales executional alignment. You told me that you guys are working on this. So just recently posted that. Would love to get your feedback. Is it something that you have worked on, right? Every piece of content, why we call it nurturing, it sits the right crane, right? How ABM should be implemented. So in the only problem that a lot of teams think that the content should be distributed only through the company's page. They post something and maybe then also boosted by ads, right? But in reality, you need to have a lot of manual engagement, a lot of manual conversations, right? So next step, if I have the champion there, right, we can ask what would be the best way to approach VP of sales. Are they leading the project? So what, and also like in your organization, who leads GTM, sales or marketing, right? ABM initiative, from whom it's coming from, right? And also like between us, depending on the level of relationship, right? Are you guys more like operating as sales assistants, or you have the equal seat in the room, right? And you can present the solutions. So based on this, we can get a lot of ideas, a lot of insights, and know how to prioritize it to sales, because then we can reach out to VP of sales in UK and let's say saying, hey, had a chat with Matthias from marketing. You guys, like you are rocking with your enterprise motion. Wanted to connect to see like how you're going to work together on account-based marketing development, right? So these steps that could be continued with meaningful future engagement, etc. Right? So we plan this warm-up.
And we could invite that VP of Sales from UK to that fictive live episode with James, who is going to present that case study.
Absolutely.
Because they're both sales directors from UK. He's going to learn something. So I think this is definitely a really nice way for you to think about, okay, based on the data that I have, on what I have collected from all the sources that we were talking about today, how can you now connect the dots and say, based on this data, based on these insights, the relationship and what I can learn based on this research, how should I plan the next steps with this account?
Yeah, and this is exactly the account activation, right? So maybe we have, and I'm sharing our ideas. Obviously, every business is unique, right? So you need that. We just want to share with you the examples, but the point is that you sit down together. There should be actually 3 people: marketing, sales, and your SME. So you review together.
Subject matter expert.
Yeah, subject matter expert. You review together specific buyers you have and map out these steps. Maybe for us, it makes sense. We can reach out and to all of these guys and say, hey, you know what? We're now running an initiative like a business breakfast where we do a mini audit of ABM campaigns, or let's say GTM strategy. If you guys are interested, we can do it. We can do it for you. Would you be up for this? It's free, right? No commitments, but for us, we are doing the research, we are getting these insights, right? And we are helping companies that way. So basically no obligations from your side. We can prepare content hub with ABM case studies and step-by-step approach for developing a successful ABM strategy, right? And share as well with our champion and ask if that's possible, if you'd like to cross-share it with your organization to set up the right motion, right? And then basically, if we're already having conversations, it's the key. The key in the process, a lot of companies miss this, but we covered this in the past year in one of the past episodes. You need to have weekly pipeline review meetings, right? You need to exchange the insights. Did you have these conversations? Did you have the engagement? Did you see any other spike of engagement of that account, right? What are the interactions? Because what a lot of companies miss in account-based marketing, and generally speaking in marketing and sales, is that there is no static programs. It's basically always you have feedback loop. Something has happened, you happen the conversation, you update your next step. It's not that let's run these ads for 3 months and let's do this retargeting. No way, it doesn't work that way. It's dynamic. You collect the new insight, right? And that's why we share it in the beginning. You have this checklist of what do we need to know about that account. So that's why we share it. There would be a lot of one-on-one conversations, right? By the way, guys, are you implementing ABM already or considering to implement it, right? Did you allocate the team? What's your stack or whatever, right? Or what's your playbook? So a lot of questions like this help us to understand where this account or how many accounts did you select, right? So it's just immediately we can understand if they say hundreds, that's immediately a red flag that this campaign will fail. It's just 100%, not 99.9, but 100% this program will fail, right? And meanwhile, we can run this retargeting content with the successful case studies. So expecting that some of them would be engaging, clicking, right, and setting up that cranes. And whenever we have the conversation, we plan, okay, what we should do next, what we should do next, what we should do next. That's the goal of these weekly pipeline review meetings. And when SME, marketing, and sales sit down and do all the steps, selecting accounts, prioritizing accounts, planning the next steps, then these teams are getting the revenue now. Obviously, they focus on the active focus list. And always, you guys, you know that we are big fans of 80-20 principle, right? Which means that you need to allocate at least 20% of your time, right, to work on the future pipeline. You're not actively working on selling to these people, but you engage with them, you invite them to the events, right? You to try to somehow to connect with them, because the reality is that a lot of people will ignore you in the beginning, right? But what a lot of sales teams does, right, and marketing as well, they send connection requests, they didn't accept, okay, or they sent a message, nobody replied it, right? Or maybe it was deleted immediately, right? And okay, so that that contact ignored me, so I won't do anything else. I would switch to the next target. No, it's not the game of numbers. You just need to realize that some relationship should be built, right? And your main KPI for the future pipeline list is that relationship, that conversation, not the opportunity itself. Because then if you'll do this, right, if you'll focus as well on the future pipeline, next quarter, you won't be thinking, where should we get new accounts? Future pipeline becomes your active focus for the next quarter, right? That's why we have these two lists. And if you do that allocation, if you work on prioritization and then planning and execution, you'll be able to generate revenue now with your existing resources. And instead of qualifying hundreds of accounts or trying to target 300 accounts, you define the most engaged accounts, the accounts that are likely to have conversation with you. You define with your resources, you define how many accounts you are able to prospect. Because what a lot of teams ask us, right? What is the right amount? But the question is, what are your resources, right? If you have 500 SD, or let's say 500 sales reps allocated to that program, or you have one sales rep, you can target completely different.
Maybe just to add, like we are talking a lot about focusing on one account and planning that one account. I think a lot of people have a question about, okay, so is that all? Is that all we are doing? Focusing specific actions for the specific accounts as we go through the list. And I just like to add one other level to this discussion, and that is that when you, for example, have done this research and have identified, let's say, the key challenges that this account has. Let's say that they're going from the product-led motion and they're starting an enterprise motion. Now, what you can do, and you have thought about, okay, what is the relevant content to help educate them about this transition from product-led into enterprise? Maybe they have technical audience. Maybe you have also educated them about how to run marketing programs for technical audience, which can be more difficult. Now, this is interesting for that one account, but that's not the only account that has the same challenge. So if you now go through your list of accounts, and I would potentially also, if you don't have a lot of them that are in your to do now or to focus on now list, just looking at these engaged accounts, potentially even from the other list, and saying, okay, what are the other accounts that belong to that mini cluster of accounts? So the cluster, we can define accounts that are similar or from a similar segment and have a similar challenge, job to be done, etc. And now we can repurpose those actions and those content also to nurture and educate the other accounts in there.
Absolutely, and this is how you create clusters. As I mentioned in the beginning with Vladimir, you, like, lots of your accounts would belong to one of the several buyer journey clusters, which means they have a specific challenge, and usually this is how they research about the potential solutions, and this is how they typically make the decisions. Obviously, every account is unique, but generally speaking, the patterns would be the same. Then you start clustering these accounts, and then you define one, like, let's say a group of accounts, 20 accounts that have a similar challenge. And then you can do, and this is so essential. There is, like, obviously there is a separation of one-to-one, one-to-few playbooks, and one-to-many. But in reality, this is as well dynamic. You do one-on-one, what we have described, but at the same time, you know that this account belongs to a specific cluster. Let's say they want to go from SMB to upmarket, right? So they're developing this enterprise motion. We create a webinar, let's say, how to go upmarket, right? And we invite that we just created for that cluster of accounts, and we do our best to get as maximum of these accounts as possible to that webinar, right? And then we can promote it to the rest of the list, also to the future pipeline, because some of the people might come. We can easily qualify them, right? We can ask if that's your challenge, right? Or we can assume if they are signing up, if they're signing up, we can reach out and ask, are you guys interested? Is this something that you're working on? And this is how account could be transitioned from future pipeline to active pipeline. Boom, you identify the trigger, right? And that's the point. This is how it happens. So it's all dynamic. It's not static. And this is the key. select the right accounts that are likely to have conversation with you, prioritize and score them, define the right volume according to your capacity, and then start doing this weekly pipeline planning and reviewing meetings where together with SME and sales, you plan the next steps, you do the execution, and you do blended programs, one-to-one, one-to-few, and one-to-many. And that was it for today. We ended up in 1 hour. I tried to incorporate all the questions that you guys have asked, so it seems that we have covered everything. And that being said, we wish you a fantastic weekend and see you next Thursday again. Have a great rest of the week. Cheers. Take care.
Bye-bye.